Welcome back for part 2 of my chat with Dr. Przybylski. In this part, we discuss the most promising, evidence-based solutions for promoting online safety for teens. If abstinence only is not the way to solve the harm that technology has for some percentage of people that use technology, what is? How can we help make people safer?
All right. I'm going to go out on a limb here because I don't know exactly how the tax system in the US works anymore. And I don't know if any of these tech companies actually pay tax in the US. I'm going to go with yes. And the answer is probably something between 5 and 17% of revenue if it's anything like a real company. I think it is insane that tax money from tech companies is spent to fill potholes. I believe that either large tech companies should pay a tiny fraction more tax, or a significant portion of the tax they pay should be spent on e-safety and digital literacy programs that are not run by the tech companies, but have a community element to them, a school element to them, and a family element to them. I think that a sizable percentage of the tax they pay should go to research. I think a sizable percentage of the tax they pay should go to learning about how to work with industry data and working with industry scientists to make the companies operate slightly more transparently, incrementally over time. I think the idea that politicians have a conflict of interest, that they take large donations in the form of campaign subsidies. They enjoy large subsidies in the form of tax that balances the books. I think it's insane that they take with one hand and then they complain with the other to break a metaphor or create a new metaphor. I think it is absolutely ridiculous. I'll tell just a very brief story here. If you look at Sweden, it's an advanced economy. If you look at the number of children who are sexually abused via the internet, okay? If you define a child who's sexually abused by the internet in a developed country as one, there's reporting, the perpetrator is found, they are arrested, they are convicted, and they serve jail time. That's already a tenth of what's out there, right? That's astronomically unlikely. There are more children in that category in Sweden than there are children who have any form of childhood cancer. Okay. And in Sweden, the main charity that just hands out money for research on childhood cancer, $40 million a year comes in the door, 39.5 million goes out the door, and it's in the form of grants, right? The equivalent charity that looks at child sexual abuse of all forms, not just online, their turnover is less than the overhead at the other charity. It's less than $500,000. The scale of resourcing for basic research into how children are exploited, how children can be protected, how perpetrators can be rehabilitated or guided off of where they're going, right? Arrested, the good stuff. None of that is funded. None of that is researched. There is no hierarchy of what is harmful about the internet. There's just what an NYU business professor says he doesn't like about his teenage daughter's behavior online. It's really weird that a random teenager in New York is setting part of the global agenda on teenage mental health in the digital age, when, again, the rates of child sexual abuse online are much higher in the Philippines than they are in Sweden. And so if we don't have any way of scaling this risk envelope, if we don't have the resources to do that, my God, are we going to waste a lot of people's time, and a lot of kids are going to get hurt. And so, no, my solution to this is no. They're already paying. We can debate the merits of making them pay more. But why are we spending this on, like, bombs? Why are we spending this on teachers' pensions or something? This doesn't make sense to me. And so it is a resourcing problem. It is a serious problem. But the question is, what are you going to do? No, you need to make kids more resilient. You need to make sure that the communities are more resilient. You need to make sure that the families are more resilient. You need to make sure that the teachers actually can give good advice that doesn't put another thing on their plate. A school phone ban sounds like it's going to work, but my God, is it stupid the moment you think about how actually implementing it. And you look at a place like New York. Since I was a student in New York, there have been 4 mobile phone bans that have gone into and out of effect since I graduated high school. I don't know where we are right now. Eric Adams is busy getting nailed by the FBI. I think he proposed one right before that. It's a pretty good sign if somebody proposes a mobile phone ban. They're about to get nailed by the FBI. I'm pretty sure that's the last thing that happens before the police roll up, because it's a desperate move. There's loads of other things we could do that are a better idea than what's happening.
The mobile phone bans are interesting because, yes, mobile phones can be distracting, but so would a television. If I brought a comic book or a magazine to class and I'm reading that as opposed to paying attention, that's also distracting. So my default whenever I'm evaluating people's reaction to new technology is, are we just doing the same thing we do every time a new piece of technology has been rolled out? Like, there was so much horror around the printing press. Oh my goodness!
Well, the printing press was quite dangerous if you look at the wars of the German princes.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe a beeper is a more similar metaphor, where there were beeper bans because there was concern that largely African American students were using it for selling drugs. And you type into the Wayback Machine or into the New York Times beeper ban, and you'll see a lot of this. But it's easy to forget is that most schools have bans on mobile phones, and they have had for a long time. And the devil is always in the details. I think that teenagers need to learn, when teachers say, put your phone in your bag and leave it off or leave it on silent, that if then they do it, then their phone gets confiscated. And then they start building a small amount of regulatory capacity so that when they're adults, they actually have experience with the frustration and the satisfaction of getting to use the phone or putting it in their fucking pocket. That doesn't just magically happen when you turn like 14, 15, 18, whatever. It's something you actually have to get good at. It's something you have to build resilience around. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to use phones for certain things at school. But that's not what the debate is. The debate is, how do you effectively get kids to be responsible with personal computers? And that's an expensive thing. It's easy to just do abstinence only, give them little rings that they have to wear until the day they're allowed to use a computer. I don't know what the hell the plan is, but I can tell you my high school had abstinence only sex ed, Matt, and we had more pregnant people in my graduating class than we had women who went to a 4-year college. My God, I don't want that logic. My God, I don't want that logic with TikTok.
Yeah, in general, there's a lot of evidence just showing how ineffective abstinence education generally is.
Yeah, but even in technology,
Yeah.
Like in 2011, the South Korean government prevented young people from using the internet between midnight and 6 a.m. with a national database. So for a decade, they created like a human rights violating machine that required national identity numbers to use the internet because they wanted to bolster sleep, mental health, and studying. After 10 years, it didn't do anything, right? The Chinese have restricted their kids to playing video games for 3 hours a week. And every piece of evidence we get out of China from Unity, the video games engine, shows that year on year, the amount that people are playing video games is going up. And it's like, if authoritarian regimes and authoritarian ideas placed in legislation clearly don't work, what makes us think that some social movement to shame parents with another thing is going to work? It's not just absence of evidence. There's really good evidence of absence. And that's the thing that's like maddening about this type of stuff. These kids do get hurt. Kids are trafficked. And there are proper problems with self-harm on these platforms.
One of the points that you mentioned about some of the horrors of child sexual abuse and sexual exploitation that we see on some of these platforms, it's not just on the platform.
Yeah. No, but it's this weird thing. Like, your question has this weird thing in it, which is the thing that people keep coming back to, which is there's this idea that the digital world and the analog world are separate. It's this very Descartesian idea that there's the world of the flesh and the world of the spirit, right? And that's not the way any of this works. I feel very socially present with you right now, but I'm sitting in Oxford and are you in San Francisco or you're on the West Coast?
San Francisco, yeah.
I don't feel like our interaction is any less real. I'm just very jealous of you having your easy accessibility of water. But no, it's one of these things where no, this is a real conversation. And it's more real than some conversations I have in face-to-face. So no, if a topic like depression, a topic like eating disorders, a topic like self-harm, a topic like child sexual exploitation, it it absolutely have an aspect and mix of both of these environments. And our job is to make these environments as not needlessly harmful as capitalism would naturally cause, not naturally, but artificially cause them to be. And to make sure that these environments are also linked into law enforcement and linked into research and linked into community resources. Because a lot of this abuse happens because of things going on in the family or things going on in the society or the community that they kind of create the vulnerability. And so tech companies absolutely have a role to play to prevent this stuff from especially going onto other platforms, basically. It's a giant mess. But the problem is that these things are really hard to look at. And it's much easier to just say, I won't give my kid a smartphone until they turn 14. I won't let them use social media until they turn 16. But by the definitions that Dr. Twangy and Dr. Haidt give, social media is Roblox. Social media is Minecraft. Social media is YouTube. Social media is all of these things. It's Stack Overflow. And I don't think you're going to get anyone to actually agree to that when they realize there's no more Fortnite. Kids bully each other over Google Docs badly. They bully each other very badly over Google Docs. And so I don't know that you can just jam this genie back in the bottle if you expect a tech sensitive workforce that will have any kind of.
Wait. So just let me
Yeah.
make sure I'm understanding what you're saying.
I'm not saying I'm coherent.
So if you tell a teenager, oh, you can't buy cigarettes, you can't have cigarettes, you're not old enough for it, you can't drive, you're not old enough for it, you can't drink, you're not old enough for it, drugs illegal, can't have them, those don't work.
No.
Do teens rebel or something? Do they find ways around the rules we put around them?
Are there rules that say teens aren't allowed to move around? Are there rules that say teens aren't allowed to breathe? Are there rules that say teens aren't allowed to eat or associate with each other? No. You don't just get to drive when you turn 16. You go through a whole process of learning how to drive before you get a driving license. If the first time you drink is when you turn 18, if the first time you drink and smoke is when you go to university, that's not good. That's why we have problems with binge drinking. That's why we have problems with overdose. If people aren't taught by their families and their communities about how to move into adulthood reasonably, we're not equipping them for the real world. And so, no, our kids have had smartphones since they were 3. But was it the smartphone I have sitting over here? God, no. It was a camera and family photos. And then it could play music one day. And then one day it could do audiobooks. And then another day it could text family. And as time has gone on, what the phone can do expands. The same should be true of social media and the algorithms that we can customize for our children or subscribe for our communities and for our young people. These bans don't exist in a way that you're framing them as. They're part of a larger societal system. It's a society where we've decided that alcohol is legal at all. Oh my God, what a stupid idea. But like within the constraints of that system, it doesn't make a lot of sense to send people off to war unless they're also a certain age or they're allowed to vote or any of these other things. These things don't exist in their own little universes and work 100% or not at all. And so when we fall into the trap of setting an age limit, you then have to ask yourself, well, what is the thing that that young person is able to encounter when they turn that age? Because I submit to you that a child who ramps up slowly and has positive and negative experiences along the way, when they turn 16, and let's imagine that's when you get to use whatever Instagram Adam thinks is the right Instagram, or whatever TikTok that lovely man in Singapore thinks is the right TikTok. You need to have some capacity to interact with that and know what the hell you're looking at. If this is like Sleeping Beauty, where you just take all the spinning wheels and you lock them away until a certain age, you're not actually preparing anyone for anything. You're just kind of kicking the ball into the long grass. You're just like putting off a challenge for later. You should talk to your kids about drinking before it comes up, like at 18, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Now, one of the curious observations I'm having as you're speaking is this sure sounds a whole lot like the argument that Jonathan Haidt makes in his book Coddling of the American Mind, where he says, that we're being too protective of children these days, and we need to let them go engage in free play and go out in the world and socialize with people and go learn for themselves. If they skin their knees, if they get hurt, then that's part of the learning process. You learn, oh, I shouldn't do that trick or that risky thing on my bicycle.
It sounds like
or
it, Matt.
skateboard.
It
or
sounds
whatever.
like it, but it's not the same.
So please, now in Coddling of the American Mind, the argument is, okay, we need to increase free play. And yet, in the Coddling of the American Mind, it's saying, okay, we need to
Be permissive.
engage it. We need to be more permissive. Let kids play. Let kids get hurt sometimes because it helps them grow, build resilience and character and all of that. Now, the subsequent argument is, okay, technology is harmful. Don't let them use technology. They can have free play everywhere else, but not on technology. So
if your two settings,
they should have free play there too.
This is like the tech optimism and undue tech hype and undue tech pessimism, techlash, right? If the axis upon which you think about a problem is between moral panic and utopian industry hype, you're always going to be dissatisfied. And if the way that you shame parents is by forcing them to pendulum between, in the case of the Coddling of the American Mind, permissiveness, and in the case of the anxious generation, authoritarian parents' rights movement, you're going to be fairly unsatisfied as a parent, because both of these situations put the parent in the position of responsibility by themselves. You either let them run free, or my God, you lock down their sexuality and their sense of identity and all of this other stuff. That's scary shit. The thing that I'm saying is a bit different. And this goes back to developmental psychology, so please bear with me. There is an authoritative style of parenting where our job is to scaffold and to release the scaffolding as the young people in our lives become those people who they want to be. And so I submit to you that this isn't about either opening a cage or slamming it shut, as Dr. Haidt would frame in a very paternalistic way in both cases, this act the to do. We are here as parents, and the decisions that we make around technology policy should also be facilitating the autonomy of young people and increasing their opportunities for action, their opportunities for self-determination, and not necessarily projecting onto them values that we might hold very deeply, but they might construe in their own way. And it's okay if they wind up having different values. But there are things that are very upsetting about this framing of Dr. Height's for me. He was on some program saying something about, maybe it was 60 Minutes, about transgenderism spreading like a virus across social networks by social contagion. And there's no evidence. The evidence for that's just as good as the evidence in the rest of the book, which is to say, not very good. But the consequences are very, very different. And the implications are very, very different. And it's just one of these things where it's, well, if my options are to functionally ignore my children in some meaningful way in the analog world, and then restrict them to the nth degree in the online world, what the hell am I doing as a parent? Like, what's my job? It's not very rewarding. It doesn't map onto my experience. And it doesn't hold tech companies accountable either. That's the thing. Like, what do you do then? And so to loop this back, it's like, I looked at the stuff that Adam and Mark are putting forward, and it looked like a bunch of ideas. But one of these things is like, it's like a grab bag of ideas from the discourse of ways to fix Instagram. And if that's the process by which the most powerful companies in the world are trying to solve this problem, that's not good. Because it's like, I don't know. Do you remember, did you ever watch the horrible Star Wars prequels?
I think I watched one or two of them.
So in one or two of them, there's this scene, Matt, and then I promise I'll shut up.
It doesn't matter which one or two.
Okay, it doesn't matter which one. But there's this scene where the Jedi, for some reason, we could call them these kind of moral entrepreneurs for the purposes of this metaphor, these people who kind of bundle all of our anxieties and sell them back to us with one simple trick, right? So these Jedi, for some reason, they're in charge of the war against the robots, right? They make it through their big, long, boring movie, but they make it through this whole big, long, boring scene. And you're wondering, like, why are these priests fighting a war? Like, why are they in charge? And the last thing they say is, like, one of the guys is like, what about the Wookiee planet? And the Wookiees, they're the ones who make, like the Chewbacca, they're the ones who make all the maps for the whole galaxy, right? Easily the most important, strategic, stupid planet in the stupid movie. And they're like, oh yeah, we need to end the movie with a giant battle on the Wookiee planet then, right? And that's what's happening here, where someone just says, but what about the Wookiees? And then Instagram and TikTok and whatever, Roblox, they're all like, all right, well, now we've got a 60-minute limit. Job done, I guess. And this is no way to fight a war in a terrible George Lucas movie. And this is no way to protect kids. It's just completely arbitrary. It's not random at all. And our kids deserve better than arbitrary.
And one of the other harms that I think this moral panic induced rush to legislation is that the legislation and the remedial actions are not very good. Like,
well, only judge against the
these...
standard of them being practical and helpful. You have to ask yourself, what are they good for, Matt?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So they are very good for PR purposes, but they're not good at protecting children. And one of the things that bore out in the data every time we tested something back when I was working in a tech company was that almost nobody uses these controls. If you create this special setting page where they can change their privacy settings, almost nobody uses it. And some of the things that I worked on were like transparency. So if there was a page that was something like cute kitty overlord and it was a bunch of cute cat memes, that is a thing that somebody might do to build a big audience. And then like right before an election, they said it switches to be like Donald Trump for America or whatever. And then it turns out that that page is run by the Russian IRA. That's a problem. And
I agree.
we wanted to service that to people. Ultimately, the product that we were allowed to launch was like you had to click several times, and then eventually there was a screen that would pop up saying, this page used to be called Cute Kitty Overlord, and now it's called Donald Trump. And the creators of it, all of their accounts were created on the exact same day, and they are all based in Russia. That's helpful information, but it's buried purposely, so it's very hard to find. So the company is technically being transparent,
but functionally,
literally, but in terms of like the spirit of the law or the spirit of the idea of transparency, they're not. One of the big pieces of legislation that is getting a lot of attention here and is currently supported by a majority of people in Congress is the Kids Online Safety Act. And this law, it's gone through many iterations, but
it's die 1,000
requiring
deaths, but go on.
Yeah, it's requiring some degree of age verification, age assurance. And this is another instance where I think at face value, it makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, we should verify ages. But when people are thinking that, they're thinking we should verify ages of children.
Yes.
But they're not thinking about it from the technical side where, oh my goodness, we have to verify everybody's age.
Yeah,
and
no shit.
People don't trust tech companies, big tech companies, social media companies these days because of many concerns that they have about privacy. And essentially what this requires, if we're going to do age verification, we basically have to get people's government IDs or social security cards or give them even more sensitive information than they already have. And when I say we, I mean you and I as grown-ass adults. We are not children, but we would have to give them these IDs. And just think of the potential harm that could cause not just to kids that might be using it, but to all of us. And it also assumes kids aren't clever enough to get around this. Or
well, no, and that's what makes me optimistic.
So
that's what makes me optimistic. If we're going to put such comically ineffective measures between like teens and sex or teens and socializing, I think that this is definitely the like IT skills curriculum that I was calling for before. This will get kids, after obviously lots of tragic events where they use services that rob more of their identities from them and steal their parents' credit card information and all those harms. After that point, we're going to have some really good people for NSA, and it's going to be great. And this will be great for recruiting at Meta and TikTok because we're going to have some really high skill 18-year-olds. But I know the age assurance and age verification stuff is shocking. If you and I sat down, Matt, to design a system to violate human rights and empower tech companies, I think that you and I would have a really hard time coming up with an idea that sounds this good for the first 5 seconds you think about it, and then is very obviously a bad idea for every second you spend after the first 5. For age assurance or age estimation, and this has happened in the UK, you can't set it, let's imagine it's like 17, 18 is the line, right? The models are so shitty and they'll never get better they're so shitty that when you set it at 18, something like 30% of people younger get through, right? And this is National Institute of Science, this is NIST report from like earlier this year.
Mhm.
So no slouches. These are real serious folks. So what happened was a company was facing a fine here in the UK because so many younger people were able to get through. So what they do is they set the age estimation parameter at like 20 so that the number of people under 18 who are denied access goes down. The false negative rate goes down because they just report accuracy, but not specificity or sensitivity. So what happens is then you create a situation where you have a bunch of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, and then 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds who don't look old enough to access the website or use the app. And so then they have to do age verification. They have to enter into a database to prove that they're old enough to use the website. And many people don't have the type of proof that's required in the form of a driving license or a passport. And so by putting this on a tech company, you violate the human rights of people below the age of 18. You violate the human rights of the people above the age of 18 in terms of information, right to information, play, and association. And then you create a database of adults, whatever their sexual predilections are, if it's an adult website, whatever kinds of commerce they're engaging in, if it's some other type of website. And you just create a database that will be very interesting for the IRA or the GRU or their Chinese counterparts. And you can't just tell tech companies to nerd harder to solve these problems and then just expect that it's going to work out because there's no proof that the age matters. And so you're just handing power to tech companies. And it's not just the big tech companies. There's a bunch of smaller companies that like serve big tech companies, and they make big promises too. Both to what they do is they make the promises to the big tech companies. So then the big tech companies have plausible deniability when the small tech company falls through. And then legislators and policy people, they make big promises to the legislators and the policy people, and then they get contracts, and then they get investment. And so it's so much worse. This ecosystem is probably worse than the one that created Cambridge Analytica, I'd argue.
Yeah. So
this ecosystem is probably more damage. It would cause.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to do
much worse
history,
because
non-cookie
the
history.
Cambridge Analytica data, it was mostly personality data and then some of the behavioral traces that people left online and then the people that they were connected to. It wasn't.
Do you want your Pornhub history going into one of these databases, Matt? I don't.
No comment.
No comment. Well, I will go on the record and say I don't think it sounds like a very good idea.
It does not sound like a very good idea. It's actually kind of funny because as some of this conversation was peaking in the United States, there was also simultaneously a scandal where somebody had hacked, I think it was Pornhub and some of these other websites like they did with Ashley Madison back years ago.
12,
and they were releasing this information to the public. I recognize that the internet is for porn and that the bulk
always has been. It's the one constant of the
bandwidth,
internet, I would argue.
Yeah. Just like the Avenue Q song. Now, I think the bulk of the bandwidth is still going to porn, although maybe AI is starting to eat into that. But the amount of personal information available on those sites beyond credit cards, if people are using them, is pretty low. I would imagine that people use like fake emails or burner emails or whatever if they have to log in, but they don't have thousands of pictures of you. They don't have all of your friends. They don't have your social security number. They don't have your driver's license number. They don't have your passport and other identifiable, really sensitive identifiable information. If that were the case with Cambridge Analytica, I imagine the FTC's $5 billion fine probably would have been much larger.
You would add a number of zeros. Yes.
Yes. There's a group that is revising legislation related to age assurance and age verification that sent me their proposal, and they asked me what I thought of this. And part of their proposal was we recognize that there are issues with forcing everybody to give this identifiable sensitive information. Yeah. So we want to use some of the technology that we have to supplement that. We'll have multiple methods to converge on the person's age. In general, I'm a methodological pluralist. I believe in using as many different methods as possible to understand things. But some of these other methods that they included in their policy proposal included machine learning and AI.
Those are used everywhere.
which may be fine because of the volume of content needing to be evaluated. Yet, when it comes to classifying people based on a picture, there have been some pretty bad failures. For example, in 2015, Google's image classifier was labeling Black people as gorillas, and in 2021, Facebook's AI image tool was identifying all Black men as non-human primates. And race is significantly easier to determine with a predictive model than is age, so long as the training data are sufficiently representative and high quality. Age is many more times difficult because some skin tones and some races appear younger or older than they actually are. Therefore, it seems likely that these models would fail again, excluding some groups of people from accessing sites that they should be permitted to access, while including other groups of people from accessing sites they should not be permitted to access. It seems like people are
Well, they're literally
repeating history.
But they don't care that they're repeating history. They are literally externalizing the cost of not thinking any of this through. They're externalizing the cost of not thinking critically. They're putting that burden onto young people and people from other ethnic backgrounds and onto poor nerds who will be expected to find a technical solution for a logical failure and a conceptual failure. And it is possible. Maybe we submit genetic samples or our passports, or we scan our earlobe, whatever. But at the end of the day, age doesn't matter. That's the craziest thing about this. Any two 10-year-olds are different. Any two 14-year-olds are different. The same 14-year-old's different on Monday than Friday. And the idea that just knowing magically how many days someone's been alive is going to make for a safer internet, thinking that that's a tool in your toolbox, is so stupid.
Wait a second. Are you saying that we have to be nuanced? There's not a simple solution here?
The thing I'm implying here is that human behavior and human development and human socialization and sexuality, these things that we're so worried about around technology, these things are so much more complicated than physics. Okay? And when physicists want to learn something about the world, they build, or they have built for them, gigantic particle accelerators. They agree on how to share time and resources. They have teams of engineers work for them on multi-billion dollar projects. I submit to you that the problems that we're talking about today are much more complicated than the nature of a proton or a quark or something. That actually, it's not possible for you or I to build our own particle accelerator in our lab for $1 million a pop. All right? I submit to you that Mark has already built one of these. He has 3 or 4 of them, depending on how you count Facebook and Instagram and Threads. I submit to you that Elon Musk nominally controls one of these right now. Google has 12 of them. And who the hell knows with TikTok? But that these are already the foundations for devices that we need to be able to use to study ourselves. And I think that it's a hell of a shame that these machines are being used to sell ads. I think that they could be used for something much better.
I love that. Okay, so just one
You're
last
fine,
question.
but it's a life's work, man. So what is it?
Yeah. What is one issue regarding tech and society and people that you don't think is getting enough attention?
It's child online sexual exploitation. It is easily the most toxic, most soul and human destroying thing that happens online. It has consistently happened for decades and continues to happen. We know that there's flows across international borders, but also within borders. And we don't give it the attention it deserves because it's hard to look at and it's hard to pay attention to. And it's easy to score cheap points in front of Congress, but it's really hard to do something that's right about it. I have my skepticism like you do about these firms, but when a senator holds up a sign of Meta's reporting of sexual child abuse material to Mark Zuckerberg and says, "Why do these numbers go up every year? Why are you letting kids down?" I say, I see someone barely basically doing his job and reporting the things that the law says that he should be reporting. And preserving evidence defends, that protects the Fourth Amendment and enables prosecutors to go after the worst people in the world. That's not to say I don't think that he can do a better job. He can. He should. Me and Mama Fatima can talk to him about that. But it's one of these things where it's like, no, this should be our top priority. And when we get this beat, when we get this licked, when we get this down 20% from its current level of soul-destroying, human-destroying violence against children, then we can talk about screen time. Then we can talk about self-esteem or some other bullshit, honestly. Like, this should be the only thing we talk about. The only parent education programs that should ever be talked about around technology should be about having conversations with your kids about, like, do you feel safe online? What's safe? What's unsafe? This shouldn't be the only conversation teachers and head teachers should have about technology. It shouldn't be about putting your phone in a fucking EM blocking backpack or something stupid like that. It should really be about having teachers be able to recognize the signs of both intra-family sexual violence and sexual violence that happens through the internet. And no one should, in a just world, no one would pay any attention to the Child Online Safety Act. It's terrible. It logically cannot work for anything besides people patting themselves on the back. We shouldn't hire 5,000 new FBI agents. We should hire 10,000 new FBI agents. NCMEC needs to be the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Their board needs to be replaced with people who are effective, not political ideologues. And they need to be supported. They need to be able to use AI and cloud-based technologies to take advantage of what's happening here in Europe, in Interpol, and here in the UK. And they need to be equipped with the tools so that when platforms do the reporting, like Mark's thing about the number of reports increase year on year at Meta, they need to be able to act on that. And if a platform like Telegram reports absolutely nothing, and it's largely an unencrypted chat platform, my God, that guy should be hauled in front of Congress. And so if you ask me what needs to be done, what thing we are not looking at, I would encourage anyone watching or listening to this to open their goddamn eyes, because there is a real problem. And it's not about teenagers feeling 3% more anxious than they did a decade ago on some stupid questionnaire. It's about real human ugliness and the fact that none of this stuff is funded and none of this stuff is evidence-based. So yeah, that's what I think.
That's the show. Thanks for watching part 2. If you enjoyed this, please do like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks again.